Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series, Criminal Mischief, the Art and Science of Crime Fiction. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and today we have a very fun guest. Dave Gaddis is a retired DEA special agent. He worked for 25 years with the agency, started way back during the days of the cocaine cowboys and worked his way up the chain, went all through South America, Mexico, Colombia, Nicaragua, you name it, has been in some hot spots all around that area. And he ended up ending his career in 2011 as chief of global enforcement operations for the DEA. So, Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, DP. It's a pleasure and an honor to join you.
Well, a lot of our viewers and stuff are readers and writers and just curious people, and everybody wants to know the inside baseball, if you will, of how law enforcement agencies work. Not only for those who write their stories, but those who read about stuff in the newspaper, those who watch all the true crime and documentary stuff on TV. They want to know what's going on really behind the scenes. You've been there. You've been up to your neck in it. So tell us about your career and some of the things that you have stomped into and managed to crawl out of over the years.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for having me. I wrote this book, The Noble Experiment, uh, based on the fact that my 25-year plus career was just an actual perpetual play date. It was uh, one case after another, full of adventure, and quite frankly, full of fun. So, and it was something I felt like I needed to share with people in case someone didn't really know what it was like to have a life in the DEA, both domestically in the United States as well as foreign. And secondly, I just thought it was a great book that perhaps my kids would want to read, or my grandkids would want to read someday after I'm long gone. So there are plenty of stories. And I listened to your episode with Chris Feistel and Dave Mitchell about After Escobar, and Jessica Balboni, who, by the way, is a fabulous editor. And anyone who is interested in having their book improved exponentially should give Jessica a call because she's fantastic. But it just made me think of the great stories that we have, and the adventure and fun that a career in federal law enforcement offers. So, yeah, I really enjoyed my career. I started in 1986
Wow.
after graduating from college in Huntsville, Alabama, and having a job with the Madison County Sheriff's Office and their Juvenile Probation Center. So back in those days, you were most likely to be hired by DEA if you had some kind of law enforcement background or law enforcement experience, 2 to 3 years minimum. And I used that because it was a college job. I would go to school during the day, and then I had the third shift um, during those days, and then I slept in between whenever I could. So that's how I ended up joining the DEA in 1986, and found myself in a herd of agents that were assigned to Miami to deal with the era of the cocaine cowboys, and the craziness that was going on in South Florida at that time, with the infusion of cocaine trafficking and smuggling. And we all remember the days of, well, many would remember the days of Miami Vice, and all the stories, Al Pacino and Scarface. Well, let me tell you, those stories are true. I mean, that's those are two examples of where art definitely imitated life, and that's what I was involved in the very beginning in 1986. So I really enjoyed my career thoroughly, and spent 7 years in Miami during those hectic times. And the Noble Experiment talks. The first probably half of the book talks about many of the cases that I had worked in Miami. Now, sometimes I traveled to the Bahamas or the Caribbean, and followed the cases and informants there. But it was strictly part of my experiences in Miami that segued through my experiences in drug enforcement to working overseas. And the second half of the book goes toward a lot of my overseas work. In the same way that Chris Feistel and Dave Mitchell and After Escobar described their casework, I was involved in some of that as well. So after 25 plus years, it was, like I said, it was a perpetual play date, but it was something that I look back and thought that it was really never a job. It was more of just a lot of fun. And but it's a young man's game, young woman's game, and then after so many years of it, you decide that you can move on and do some other things. And perhaps at the end of this interview, I can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, enjoyed it very much. And I guess the book starts out with a shooting that I was involved in with one of my partners, A.D. Wright. And it was only after 6 months of being on the job. Now, keep in mind that every time we went out and made arrest based on weeks, months, or even years of investigation, depending upon the size of the organization that we targeted, we always seized firearms. I mean, every
Okay.
doper worth of salt was running around with firearms, everything from AK-47s to small caliber handguns, Walter PPK, um, 9 millimeters were very, very popular back in the day, but we were seizing them on every single case that we were involved in. Um, Both Chris Feistel and I were assigned to the clandestine laboratory group. So we were oftentimes following leads on cocaine labs that were at that time. It's not happening now, but at that time, a lot of the cocaine base was smuggled in, and they had to convert it to cocaine hydrochloride, that
Right.
white, flaky, powdery stuff that so many people love to shove up their nose in the 1980s, and still do, I imagine. So those labs locally in the Redlands, south of Miami, and in the outskirts of Miami, and sometimes in the cities of Miami, in the suburbs, they were transforming the base into cocaine hydrochloride, and it was our job to identify where those labs were and to go in and dismantle them and neutralize and hold those people responsible. And it was a dangerous job for two reasons. Number one, you're dealing with cocaine traffickers who are very serious about protecting their business and their materials and their livelihood, if you will. And second, those precursor chemicals like ether, acetone, methyl ethyl ketone, they're all highly, highly volatile. I mean, explosive. So we were oftentimes dealing with both of those struggles, those challenges on the front of hitting a clandestine lab. Did we have explosions? Yes, there were explosions. Um, Thank goodness none of our agents were ever hurt. There's contamination you had to worry about. So we had special uniforms, masks, SCBAs. We had suppressors on our machine guns so that the sparks coming out of the barrels wouldn't necessarily set the whole place off if we were in a firefight. And yeah, 6 months down the road from my showing up in Miami one day, we ended up in one of those firefights.
Welcome to
So
the canteen.
that's right.
Yeah.
It was quick. It was quick. Now, fortunately, there was, it's a knife that cuts on both sides. Number one, um, you are green at 6 months, right? You're still green and you're trying to feel your way around. You don't have the experience that the senior agents would have in dealing with a situation like that. But on the other side, we just got out of training. AD had finished training 6 months before I did. So through 3+ months of training in Quantico, Virginia, you probably throw about 15 to 20,000 rounds of firearms training down the range. And you can hit a gnat's ass at 50 yards. In fact, we were trained on a 50-yard course, where most police agencies are trained on a 25-yard course. Rightfully so, because statistically, most shootings happen within 15 feet
Mhm.
of the officer and the perpetrator. But at the FBI Academy, the FBI is a stickler for firearms training, so they had a 50-yard range, and we were pretty proficient after that much firearms training. So even after 6 months, we were still very proficient, and that worked to our benefit in this particular firefight. And actually, that's the first chapter is called Swords Drawn, and it was about that shootout. And it gives you a little bit of background about what it was like to land in Miami. Have never been there before. Um, I was coming in from the Atlanta area, the DEA office that had recruited me. I was living in Alabama at the time of my recruitment, as we have talked about, and so this was all very new to me. But yeah, Miami was a whole new ball game, man, and it was a blast for a 24-year-old testosterone-filled kid. It was a fun job. But that day, it was a little more than fun. It got serious, but uh, fortunately, even though AD was wounded in the shootout, we were able to walk out of the house, and the perpetrator who fired upon us, he went on a slab. So it was interesting. This guy,
How did that
what
unfold? I mean, so you're going to this guy to arrest him, or you're going there to gather information? What was the purpose of interfacing with him, and how did it go south?
well, as agents in the clandestine lab group, enforcement group, we ended up having a number of leads that would tell us that the ex-trafficker was running a lab somewhere in the immediate vicinity of Dade County, maybe Broward County, making up South Florida. And in this case, this individual was buying the precursor chemicals from a location that we were essentially controlling. So by virtue of developing a profile of coming in and buying a certain number of types of precursor chemicals that we knew was needed to make cocaine, along with he wanting to pay in cash, and of course, meeting other types of profiles, not wanting to give his last name, um, and then conducting some surveillance on this individual. We realized that we had an excellent lead on somebody who was running a cocaine conversion lab. So we started following him around. He went by the name of Sammy. Uh, he ended up having an alias. His driver's license was like Sammy Garcia or Samuel Garcia, which was an alias altogether. Turned out that he had come over from Cuba as a career chemical during the Mariel boat lift. And he had been up in New York. And in his real name, he had a murder warrant because he was involved in a variety of hits against other narco traffickers up in the New York area, and had come down to Miami, and he was working with an organization as a lab attendant. So he already had an experience in murdering people, and that we didn't know because we didn't have his real name until after the shooting. But so we decided one day to round everybody up. We had enough PC. We had the federal prosecutor on board, a wonderful prosecutor by the name of Lee Stapleton, very supportive. All the paperwork had been put together, and we went to the house. We didn't know if the lab was at that house, although chemicals had been delivered there, so we suspected that was a possibility. So when we went through the door, Sammy uh, basically gave himself up and started a conversation with us. And it didn't take long where he split, went to a bedroom, opened the door, and immediately began firing on us.
Yeah.
At that time, there were only two agents that were following Sammy, and that was AD and myself. So we didn't know who else was in the room. I had already gone to the garage to check to see if precursor chemicals were there because that was common in terms of suburban, smaller labs, the precursor chemicals, because they do reek of odor, right? The odor of uh, ether
Yeah.
and acetone is quite
Eye
noticeable.
watering.
It
Yeah.
is literally.
Yes, it is.
So so I saw those chemicals, and it was just about that time I was coming back out of the garage to tell AD, we've got him, let's handcuff him, let's get him in, is when Sammy bolted and started firing on us. So within a distance of probably about 10 to 15 feet, I would say probably 35 or 40 rounds were exchanged. And unfortunately, it didn't start off really quick. When that door came open, it was down a 15-foot hallway. And when that door came open, Sammy was already in the prone position, lying on his belly. And all we could see was just barely part of his hair. And we could see the barrel of a handgun pointing at us. And then he immediately clicked off like 3 rounds down the hallway. He missed us because AD and I had actually already found cover on each side of the opening of that hallway. AD on the left side, myself on the right. Now, I'm right-handed, but since I was on the right side of that hallway, I had to transfer my pistol to my support hand or my weak hand. And I had the pistol in my left hand looking down the hallway. So it doesn't give you a great deal of confidence in your shooting when you're actually firing with your weak hand. For anyone who has experience in firearms training. So AD, I had already returned fire with my left hand, and Sammy was still firing, and AD gave an Israeli peek. That is when you come from your cover and you quickly look like that, and then you might do it again, preferably in a different spot. Well, on the second occasion when AD did an Israeli peek, Sammy had fired, striking the wall, and that bullet ricocheted off the wall and went through AD's right eye,
Mm.
and it exited above his right ear. So he had immediately lost his eye, and of course, the impact of the round dropped him. So AD was lying in the middle of the hallway, and he was in full view of Sammy, the perpetrator. So that was when I felt the earth on my shoulders because I didn't
Sure.
know if AD was still alive. I didn't know if he was able to crawl away, if I would have to reach down. Actually, instinctively, I did try to reach down, but then Sammy fired on me again, on both of us. At this time, fortunately, he wasn't firing directly on AD. He was firing on me because I was the new threat. So I basically instinctively jerked back and continued to fire. And AD during that round of exchange, AD did have the energy to get on his knees and crawl out of the line of sight of Sammy. So that was great. But here I was alone in the fight, I thought. And Sammy had decided when he saw AD crawling out of his line of sight that he was going to finish him off, perhaps finish us both off. So he began walking up the hallway, and I just emptied all I had. And as he was turning and firing upon me, because I did hit him a few times in his torso, AD was able to muster with his left eye, which was not his dominant eye, but it was the only eye he had. And he fired as well. So now we were flanking and taking on Sammy, and that basically caused him to spin around a few times, drop, and he expired from his wounds. So once I was able to approach Sammy, he still had his firearm in his right hand, and he was looking at AD, and he was trying to raise that pistol. So the only thing I could think of doing was to step on the hand, remove the gun, and then move his face away from AD so he couldn't even see him. I mean, he was already in the phase of expiring. He didn't move from that point forward. And then I had to look at AD. And AD obviously was in trauma. He was in shock. We had to seat him down immediately. And well, we say I had to sit him down immediately and worry about his condition. But wouldn't you know it, by the grace of Almighty, our God, a doctor, a surgeon from Miami happened to be living across the street. This house was in a country club. It
Wow.
it was called Miami Lakes Country Club, and it was in Miami proper. You'd never think a cocaine lab would be working, in a ritzy country club, exclusive neighborhood. And that's one reason why they were doing that, right? Sammy and his associates had set up a sophisticated ventilation system so that whatever odors were coming out of the rooms that they were using, it was going down through their septic. They had removed a toilet and it was going into the septic system of Metro-Dade. It's lucky that neighborhood didn't actually go up when somebody was,
Hmm.
when there was a backfire on their vehicle going through the neighborhood. But it was yeah, it was a crazy day, and I was able to get him seated, and that doctor came running through the front door when the shots, because he knew someone had to be injured. It was quite a heroic move on his part, and
Wow.
he took care of AD. He stabilized him. He triaged him immediately. We had already called 911, and they air vac him
Hmm.
right off of a street in front of the house and got him to the hospital and saved his life. But not only saved his life, AD was able to be fitted with a prosthetic eye, and he continued his career with DEA.
Wow.
And if you fast forward some 30 years later, he ended up being the special agent in charge of the Miami Field Division.
My goodness, what a
A real
story.
hero.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's tough. So you, with crazy things happened in Miami, obviously, but you also ended up south of the border. What kind of situations and things? I imagine there the rules are a little different. The rules of engagement are a little different. Um, and
They
you're
are.
outnumbered, and you're overseas, as it were. How, what kind of pickles did you have there, and what kind of cases did you get involved in?
I'm sure your viewers got a good sample of that when Chris and Dave talked about after Escobar, but you're right. Um, well, after about 7 years in Miami, from 86 to 92, I did take a foreign assignment. In between that, I entered a program called Operation Snowcap, which David Mitchell had been a part of,
Hmm.
and Jerry Salome that you had heard of from
Hmm.
Chris. And that was where we went down to South America and Central America, and we hit the traffickers and the trafficking organizations right where they initially begin the process. And that's the labs, the cocaine labs, the money caches, their communications, um, locations, and things of that nature. And by doing that, it was kind of, not kind of, it was paramilitary. We were
Yeah.
working with the host nation counterparts. If it were Bolivia in the Chapari jungle or the Beni Plateau, it would be the Umapar. If it were the Upper Huallaga Valley of Peru, where a lot of labs were located, it was with the Peruvian National Police. And we had to work with them, but we utilized DEA intelligence and information that we were collecting could be from wiretaps, could be from human sources, which we refer to as HUMINT. And we were very successful in working jointly with our host nation counterparts and hit those labs. So when I was there doing that in Peru and Bolivia and Guatemala, I really enjoyed being overseas and I enjoyed the challenges and the adventure of being in overseas because it's not just you're not always working. I mean, sometimes you go out and you eat, different cuisines, different cultures, and of course you're learning a new language.
Yeah.
So I had minored in Spanish in college, but I didn't speak Spanish. So DEA had to send me to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California,
Yeah.
at the Presidio, and I enjoyed that. Learning a new language was a lot of fun, and I'm glad I did it. And I was very thankful the DEA paid for it. So now it was time for me to pay them back. So using the language was very helpful. And dealing with the guys in Latin America just kind of just it just got under me and it hooked me. And I decided, okay, I'm going to start putting in for some overseas positions. So
Well, I imagine that these labs that you went after there weren't in country clubs.
no, they weren't. They were in dense jungles.
I bet.
with mosquitoes and horse flies that were the size of birds, blackbirds, it seemed. And I mean, we were sleeping in tents covered in nets, and oftentimes we'd end up with dysentery, from bad water or
Sure.
bad food. Sometimes we had to kill what we ate. And I remember one time on a snowcap assignment, we were at a forwarding operations base in the Beni Plateau of Bolivia. And we did run out of food, and we ended up having to kill a wild hog. And we dressed the wild hog, and we did have a cook that was with the Bolivian forces with us. We were actually raiding an entire town called Santa Ana, and Santa Ana was run by the traffickers. So we flew in our helos, piloted by Bolivian pilots, the Red Devils, Diablos Rojos, and
Hmm.
who were ballsy and great pilots. And we were able to basically get in, arrest some traffickers there, and shut them down. And but before that, we didn't have anything to eat the last day before we went in, so we ended up taking a wild hog and sling loaded them from one of our Huey helicopters, brought them to camp, and the cook cooked them up, and everybody was happy. Nothing like barbecue, man.
It's nothing like barbecue.
But
A
that
little
barbecue was
picnic
a
in the
little
jungle.
rough. I'm going to tell you, it was tough. It
Yeah,
wasn't it wasn't the barbecue I'm used to here in the US.
exactly.
And you're from Alabama, you know good barbecue.
Exactly.
So we had a great time, and then once I knew I wanted to be a foreign agent, I put in for assignments, and I ended up being selected to go to Central America. And I was in San Jose, Costa Rica for 3 years.
Hmm.
But my job was not centered in Costa Rica like the other agents. I was the attaché responsible for a DEA presence. We didn't have an office in Nicaragua, in Managua.
Yeah,
So
right.
I would have to travel to Managua on a consistent basis and work
What
with our.
years were this?
This was from 1990 to 1995.
Okay. Was Ortega still there then, or was this
He
after?
was. He
Yeah,
was. Yeah, I've got a actually on my website. I have a picture of me and Danielle.
yeah.
I had met him in Managua.
He was an interesting cat.
Very. His wife was even more interesting. She was a combination of Cher from a physical standpoint, Cher and Morticia from the Addams family. I mean, yeah, she was out there, man. She wore the
Yep,
armband snake jewelry, and she
yep,
had the ankle skirts that were
yeah.
50 bright colors. And yeah, she and I'm sure still is, that she's a different kind of individual. But and I suspect that maybe she was the one running the show oftentimes
Interesting.
instead of President
That's
Ortega. But at
that's
that
often.
meeting, he was diplomatic and kind to us.
Yeah.
But after the whole Barry Seal
Yes.
issue and the Sandinistas, I don't think he had much like for DEA or for the U.S. government. So,
Right. Exactly. That's
but at that time, the Nicaraguan National Police realized that they were over their heads because the Colombian traffickers were offloading on a consistent basis all the time. They were going in, and they were, every week 800 kilos, 1,200 kilos, 600 kilos. Offloading it would push it out of the aircraft on a low flight. The go fast boats would pick it up, bring it inland, and then it would go out into stash houses, eventually on the Pan American Highway up to Mexico. And I
mhm.
mean, multi tons per month were coming in, and they
Yeah.
knew they
I
were over
think
their head, and it was
I think it's
corrupting the
interesting.
entire
Interesting.
country.
I think it's interesting. A lot of people don't understand how you move that much product out of the mountains and to get it to a boat. Now, once you get it to a boat, I get it. But to get it down there, were these mostly human bearers or did they use pack animals? Did they use wagons? Did they use vehicles? What was the mechanism for getting it from the labs in the mountains and once it's done and getting it down to where they're going to ship it out?
Well, all of the above. I've seen
Yeah.
them use horses. I've seen them use, in the case of Bolivia, they were using llamas, packed
Mm-hmm.
llamas. But frankly, the majority, when you're talking about Colombian cartels in charge
Yeah.
of these things, they were using small fixed wing aircraft,
Yeah.
a double engine, oftentimes like Pipers and Cessnas. They were using um, the go fast vessels. We were
Yeah.
even seeing some, even as early as the 90s, we were seeing submarines. Now,
Yeah.
they weren't sophisticated submarines like we interdict today that
Right.
can actually travel 7 to 9,000 nautical miles.
Wow.
But they were floating on surface. They'd be towed behind by a fishing vessel. And then there was a mechanism. If they saw an interdicting vessel from the U.S. Coast Guard, Navy, or a local, Latin America naval vessel approaching them, they would hit a button and it would fill up tanks in what they were towing and it would sink. So it'd be tethered to them, but it would sink, a good 10 meters below the surface. And they could be boarded and no one would know that there's 8,000 kilos of cocaine floating underneath the vessel, right?
Wow.
Because it was tethered from underneath where you couldn't see it. So an entire array, a myriad of mechanisms and methods that they were using to smuggle dope. But that Nicaragua experience was a lot of fun, and I wrote a chapter called "My Nicaraguan Pillow," and I'll give it to you quickly. And it goes towards some of the fun that you have while you're out there. Is we were on an operation waiting for an airdrop to happen based on DEA intelligence from a Colombian informant, and we knew the time, we knew the general location, and we knew uh, who was behind it. So what we ended up doing is setting out about a day before. We had to hike about 5 miles into dense jungle on the Pacific coast of Nicaragua. We were there with the Nicaraguan National Police. Um, we didn't have firearms that we could divulge to them that we had, but they provided us with AK-47s while we were on operation with them. It was myself and another agent, a guy named Glenn. And during the night, when we inserted, it was probably about, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night. And then we were going to get up about 4 a.m. and wait for this plane to do a low altitude drop. And then we were going to hit the guys as they come in. And it was 11 o'clock at night when we were finally inserted, and we found this like level area where we could make camp. And you couldn't see much. We had a few flashlights with the red lenses, and I just picked a place that I thought was clear and level, and I, laid out a blanket and I laid down, and I found this smooth rock. It was a fantastic smooth, almost had like this notch in it where I could just lay my head, right? So I did that and I slept like a baby, man. Maybe it was because of the 5 mile ruck that we had to make going in there, but I was exhausted and slept great. Well, when we got up and the sun was beginning to come up and I was packing up my stuff, and I was just telling Glenn, man, what great sleep I just had, man. I think it was that rock. And I looked over to show him how smooth this rock is, and it wasn't a rock. It wasn't a rock at all. It was a pile of cow dung.
Exactly. A
Some
cow
wild
patty. Yeah.
cow. Yeah, yeah, because they had cattle. The farmers would let the cattle go anywhere, right? And it was this dried pile of cow dung. And I
Yeah.
had just wallered in, and stuck my face in it, like you would a pillow.
Yeah.
Gave me a great night's sleep. So I was the butt of a joke for a couple of
I bet. The
couple of
things you do
minutes.
for your country, right? That's funny.
I can tell you, it made for a great night's sleep.
Yeah.
But we ended up a successful interdiction there. We got
Yeah.
800 kilos on an airdrop,
Wow.
and as the captain who was his name was Leonel Espinosa. He was with us the entire time. Hard rocker, man. That guy could rock. He didn't take any breaks, and was committed to his career and his job, his mission. When we saw that twin engine aircraft lowing down to about 300 feet, just as Our intelligence said it would. And we saw those bultos, those packages of maybe 25 to 30 kilos each dropping out of the window. There was a door window that were dropping out. He called his guy that had the RPG, and he said, Dave, do you think I should take that plane out? And I mean, he could have too. We were that close. We couldn't have been more than a couple of 100 meters,
Yeah.
you know, 250 yards
Yeah.
as that plane was coming in. And it was, I mean, it was going as slow as it could, not to
Yeah.
break up the
Exactly.
packages when they fall.
Right.
And I thought for a second, knowing there's a village, just a kilometer down the road, I thought, I, trust me, I was tempted, but I thought,
Yes.
no, I said, Capitan, mejor que no lo hagas. Better you not do it.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
still got this to worry about. So
Right.
he could have though. He could have taken that RPG and boom, put it right in the side of that. And he was prepared to do it, but it was agreed not to. And we ended up stopping about 18, 20 defendants, traffickers, and
Yeah.
we ended up getting the 800 kilos, and it was a great case. It really was. Made many headlines in Nicaraguan press,
Yeah.
and
But when they make the movie, they will fire the RPG. So
yeah, they will,
yeah, they will.
and throw a couple of hand grenades,
They
right?
throw a couple of hand grenades. Yes,
Yeah, yeah. Don't
exactly.
forget the claymores.
Exactly. All of that.
But we were in Fort Benning, Georgia.
Yep.
DEA agents in Operation Snowcap were trained in all that. So, in fact, we actually were given C4 as part of our munitions. And we ended up keeping the C4 in our pockets, but really we didn't blow up much except when it came to airstrips. And
Sure.
we used the canister bombs for that. We dig a
Mhm.
hole and we put them about 2 feet into the airstrip dirt and then blow them up with detonation
Right.
cord, right? So
Right.
the C4 we really never needed, but if you were going into a house that was locked, you could have, stuck it in with a blasting cap and a 2-inch fuse, and you could have blown that door up. But we never needed it, but it did come in handy for one thing. It helped us warm up our coffee every morning. That stuff will warm up a cup of coffee in about 30 seconds.
I bet it will. Better than a microwave.
Yeah, yeah. You leave the cap away, but you can just set a little corner of it on fire and that thing will burn like you wouldn't believe.
A
Warmed up a
C4
mini pops of
stove. I
coffee
see it
for us.
right now. That's incredible. Well, before we have to wrap all this up, tell us about what you're doing now and what's next for you. Where you got this book out now. What's next for you?
Well, thank you. It has been a real circle of adventure. I mean, even though I retired, um, I decided that I was going to stay in the game. So I hung up my own shingle and created a company called G Global Protection Solutions. And I ended up doing everything from being a kidnapping hostage negotiator for kidnapping for ransom cases. Worked a lot in Mexico. You tend to burn through your Rolodex when you retire in DEA, whether that's with corporate contacts or individuals you've met through your career. And I had an extensive Rolodex of many companies. So I ended up being a hostage negotiator for years. I ended up doing corporate security, executive protection work in Mexico and Colombia. I even worked a case where we had an American who was kidnapped in Yemen, so by the Houthis. And after 200 days exactly, we were able to get him back alive. So I had a lot of adventure and a lot of fun. After 13 years of doing that, I've decided to just take the slow lane, and I've enjoyed being on a farm, a horticulture farm. Uh, Raising blueberries, apples, peaches, and caring for my own garden. So
Cool.
I have like a half-acre garden. So there's plenty of vegetables if you get hungry.
Well, where can people find out more about you and buy your book and all of that stuff? Where should they go?
Oh, that's great. Go to www.a/nobleexperiment.com.
anobleexperiment.com. That's
a-nobleexperiment.com, and they'll be
okay.
able to see it. And the book is actually available on Amazon,
Yep.
iTunes. I have it in Audible for those who simply like to listen to their books. And it's had a lot of success, and it's been a lot of fun. When I wrote it during COVID, because that was about the only time I was slowed down due to my typical international travel. Um, I built a pier on a small pond, and I cut all the grass I could cut and pruned all the trees I could prune. So I ended up doing something, and I decided, finally I'm going to write this book.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun, and I've had a great response from it. So I appreciate your viewers taking a look.
Well, do everybody do, Dave, it's been a pleasure. This has been so much fun. I could talk to you for hours, you know,
Thank you.
and maybe we'll do this again down the road. And hear more stories.
Yeah, we
So
barely touched the surface, but maybe
yeah,
we will have that
we will.
opportunity.
In fact, let's do. I think it's wonderful. And I tell all our viewers, hit the thumbs up to help us reach more people. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast series so you can see more and more of these interviews. But until then, that wraps up this episode of Criminal Mischief, the art and science of crime fiction, here on the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series. And so this is DP Lyle signing off, and I want you to keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun, and try not to get caught.